Thank you for checking out my video. First, I just want to appreciate this cover art. This is literally the reason why I read this comic. Anyways, here's the video. Issue 3 starts off early in the morning with Nathan in the kitchen making breakfast. His dad walks in surprised to see his son already getting a head start on the day. Nathan reminds him that it's writing day. We're next shown Nathan's short story. I'm going to read the whole thing, so if you'd rather skip it, then click here. Elizabeth Beckett hated today. She'd been on time for the job, even though Elliot had screwed up the entry route. The man was endlessly incapable of giving directions before his first cup of coffee. But they were lucky. The heist had gone over fast. Easy, like they thought it would. At 9:05 a.m., she and Elliot walked out of the MK Branch Bank on the eastern edge of Montrose, dressed business casual, with 3 bags totaling over $100K in cash. At 9:06, as Elliot loaded the second bag into the gray Camry, the shooting started. Elliot crumpled, the life draining from him in an instant. Now, hours outside of the city, as Elizabeth tried to steady the car in a brisk fall wind, all alone, save for the giant bag of money in the seat next to her, she couldn't stop thinking about the irony. She worked at banks before she started to rob them. Her favorites were the ones tied up with dark money, energy lobbyists, foreign interests, super PACs. Fuck 'em. The banks knew that kind of cash had strings attached, so what if it was her to pull them? That's how she'd met Elliot in the first place, on a job, or rather, before the jobs. 2 outsiders pulled together at a girlfriend's lame house party, a heated debate about corporate greed pulling them closer under swirls of marijuana smoke. The second time they were in the same room together, she sold him information on an MK branch. He was her first. 5 years later, they were inseparable, in bed and in work. Together, they had inched hand in hand into a new lifestyle, a love of vintage, expensive, but without the budget to make it happen, not without some shortcuts. There were rough patches, sure. Zeroed out bank accounts, too. There were always threats, violence sometimes, never from him, but always because. But they'd chosen their path, together. That's what he used to say. Hell, that's what today was about. A way to start over. Again, like last time, and the time before, and before. She glanced again at the empty passenger seat. She felt something strange, a tickle deep in her throat, rising up stronger. It reminded her of the bank, the way the blood gushed from Elliot's wounds. Like the broken garbage disposal in the first flat they rented together. Dirty dishwater gurgling out no matter how many rags they drunkenly shoved into it. Suddenly, she laughed. Her hand raced to her lips, trying to hold back the venom. But it was too late. She laughed again. What was so funny? She started to cry. Why was she suddenly so happy? Because there is no next time. Elliot's dead. For the first time since she put the pedal through the floorboards outside of Montrose, Elliot throwing the first bag of cash into the back seat, his smile brighter than a flash of police lights, she was able to think. She looked to the passenger floorboard, the bag still smeared with his blood. Clumped near the handle, the shape of his fingers inside. The money was real. She looked out the windshield. So was the open road. For the first time in a long time, Elizabeth exhaled. She smiled, overwhelmed by the possibilities, a clear road and a bag full of cash. Elizabeth Beckett had nowhere she had to be, no one to answer to. She was free from looking over her shoulder. She could go anywhere. She could be anyone. As she turned up the radio, suddenly belting out a tune about an American girl, mangling Petty's voice, today was starting to look a whole lot better. The story Nathan wrote has a great springboard into wherever he wants. The irony is that his story is too open-ended. He doesn't know where it should go. As Nathan is struggling, his mom starts reading over his shoulder. Nathan retreats to his room away from his distractions, but ends up watching cat videos. Later, a timer goes off, implying that Nathan has been procrastinating for a while. He tries to motivate himself by saying he'll write a chapter or 2 before lunch, then another after, and maybe another before bed, but even he knows that's a lie. This whole scene is probably familiar to a lot of people. The next few panels are intercut between Nathan and the mechanical being saying radiant. It boils over with Nathan saying radiant. Continuing to procrastinate, Nathan visits Marshall at his job. Marshall happens to be thinking up names for Nathan. Among the potential names are the Vanguard, Darkness, and one that would have had Mighty Morphin in the title, which is a nod to Kyle Higgins' work on the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comic run. Nathan is confused as to why Marshall is coming up with superhero names. Marshall tells him, well, isn't that where we're headed? They talk for a bit, and Nathan asks Marshall what he thinks about Radiant in the name. Marshall ruminates on it and comes up with Radiant Black, finally naming our hero. Marshall tells Nathan that the Twitter is already set up and will be sending him the login details soon. Nathan hates social media marketing, so he leaves saying he has writing to do. Nathan leaves the store and starts to put himself down for not getting any work done. In his self-hating rant, he also curses in the Radiant language without realizing it. Before he gets in his car, he spots a cafe and figures a change in scenery could help the writing process. Nathan struggles some more with his story, and I actually like hearing his thought process on it. He really thinks out every direction of his story, but that may be a bad thing since he hates any path he comes up with. After a few beers, he settles with the line, Elizabeth Beckett didn't recognize her life. We cut to Nathan at home finally making progress on his writing. We see his screen and see that he's typing in the Radiant language, indicating something is off. Suddenly, Nathan's room explodes and Radiant Black with a dope-looking cape is floating before Nathan. Radiant Black grabs Nathan and flies him high in the air. Undeciphered, Radiant Black says, "Come on, you know who I am." And then in English, "I am what you will never be, Nathan. Worth breathing." And reveals it's an older Nathan and then just drops young Nathan. Nathan wakes up screaming, showing it was obviously just a nightmare. The writing, or lack thereof, is putting a psychological toll on Nathan and his subconscious is starting to retaliate. Before Nathan can sit alone with the fact he hasn't written anything, he gets a notification from the Radiant Black social media account saying someone needs help with a flat tire. We next see Radiant Black flying down to a family having car trouble. They're all surprised to see that he's real and that he actually came. Radiant Black, however, doesn't know how to change a flat tire and ends up accidentally breaking the lug wrench. The family, thankfully, is understanding and appreciates his help nonetheless. Thinking quickly, Radiant Black asks what direction their house is and just flies them all back home in their car. Nathan returns home early in the morning and goes right to sleep. Sometime later, he wakes up and opens his laptop and writes, Elizabeth Beckett had nowhere to go, so she went back home. His father, up for an early walk, checks in on Nathan and is glad that Nathan had a productive day. He replies that he's glad too. After his father leaves, Nathan says to himself, this time, already pessimistic about another writing day. Issue 3 was a hard departure from the usual superhero story we see. The main issue was seeing the battle between Nathan's self-sabotaging nature and his need to do better. He desperately tries to write a story, but is directionless, and so he just procrastinates. At the same time, Marshall, the Radiant Energy, and himself all come at him for not embracing his powers. At least that's what I got. Thinking about it some more, I do like how intimate we are getting with Nathan's emotional state. He has tons of self-worth problems, as seen in that dream sequence. He feels he'll never mature as a person, as symbolized with the older Nathan with the beard. And he also feels he can't handle the responsibility of being a superhero, which is symbolized by the cape around Radiant Black. We're also seeing how elements of his life are influencing his story, like how his main character doesn't recognize her life anymore and moves back home, a parallel to Nathan's disastrous time in LA and how he had to move back home himself. Overall, this issue gave us more character development with Nathan, or at least we got to see more of his character struggles. Anyways, thanks for watching everyone, and see you next time.